Welcome to the Fleet Geeks podcast. We're here to help develop fleet and transport professionals. Do you want to progress and develop your skills and knowledge? We promise to bring lively conversation and debate around interesting issues and keep you bang up to date with changes in our awesome industry. The Fleet Geeks are a community of professionals, and if you enjoy the podcast, why not join the discussion for free in the Fleet Geek community over on Facebook.
So, welcome everyone. We should have people dropping in the attendees list. I can see the numbers increasing there, which is absolutely fantastic. Welcome everyone that's joining us in the attendees list. We really do appreciate you joining us. I'm joined here, with the Fleet Geeks, and I'm joined by Mr. Mike Vickers, Joe Collins, and James Adcroft, as per the advertising. We've got, just so you know, I'm not sure if Mike, James and Joe you can see, but we've got 25 people so far and counting in the attendees, which is really, really exciting. So I'm hoping you can all hear me okay. There, at the bottom of your screens, there should be a raise hand. So if you can hear me okay, please just raise your hand and confirm that you can hear me okay. Brilliant. Fantastic. It looks like everyone can hear me okay. So thank you very much for joining us on this webinar around what is a transport manager worth. I'm sure a lot of you will have been quite interested in what that is and how we're going to approach that subject. So I've been very kindly joined, like I said, by Mike. Mike is a training manager with us at Flagship Partners and helps support the transport manager training. We've got Joe, who's an HR and ER specialist as well. And we've got James, who is a senior manager with a large fleet. I'm going to come around to you guys to let yourselves give a sort of introduction shortly. But one of the things that I wanted to do as part of launching Fleet Geeks as a free webinar, as an opportunity for transport managers to get CPD, which is continuous professional development, within their job role, and to help support them ensure that they perform professionally and perform well in their roles. We launched this webinar and we put the social post out, and I'm not sure how many of you saw the post on Facebook, but it just literally blew up with comments. We had comments from all sorts of people, and it was, absolutely incredible to see that we had many people inputting, transport managers weren't worth very much, which was quite disappointing to see people's points of view on that. There was a lot around transport managers needing to have been a driver first as well, which is something that we'll touch on today. And there's actually a poll for people to be able to vote on that as well. If you do have any questions at the end of this session, there's going to be an opportunity to ask via the Q&A button. So if you use the Q&A button to add any questions for any of us, please do put that in there and we'll help field those towards the end of the session. We're going to give about 30 minutes of content, and then we'll have the opportunity for any questions and answers after that if we haven't answered what you're looking for. Just a bit of an introduction to Fleet Geeks then. It's a new concept that Flagship Partners have launched. Essentially bringing free webinars, networking, and the podcast as well, opportunities for transport managers to be able to develop themselves and support their professional development in their role. And this webinar itself, we're going to be hosting them on a monthly basis, and then we're going to have open networking as well. So in this webinar, there won't be an opportunity for attendees to be able to speak. We're up to 30 people now, which is really, really exciting. So thanks for popping by and listening in. We're going to be having networking where you're going to be able to build your network. We think it's really, really important to give people that opportunity to be able to build their network. So I'm going to just introduce the rest of the guys. Most of you will know me, Pete Rushmer, the founder of Flagship Partners. I'm a transport manager myself, and I also support companies via consultancy services as well. And I've also got a safety degree too, so we do some safety work at Flagship. First of all, I'm going to go over to Joe. Joe is our HR specialist. Joe, are you able to just give a quick introduction, please?
Yeah. Hi everyone. Feeling a little bit nervous. This is my first go at this. Thanks for that, Pete. Qualified to level 5 with CIPD. Currently, as Pete said, sort of an ER specialist, sort of anything people related, regardless of what it is I deal with. Currently dealing with a couple of haulage companies, all that are different. So obviously my knowledge is really having to step up. And recently through Flagship, I actually did the CPC course as well, which was a real eye-opener. And it gives me a good understanding of what you guys go through. as transport managers.
Okay. Brilliant, Jo. Thank you very much for dropping by at this lunchtime to help support us as well. Next up, James, could I invite you to introduce yourself, please? People who have listened to the Half Dozen Things podcast will have heard from James previously, who was a brilliant guest and gave a fantastic podcast. Thank you for joining me again, James. Over to you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Pete. Thanks for inviting me, and great to see everyone. So hi, I'm James. I am a transport compliance manager for a large own account operator in the UK. So we run about 4,500. We have about 4,500 heavy goods vehicle drivers, about 22,000 van drivers. That's a fleet of assets on heavy goods of some 6,500, combination of units and trailers, probably 6,500 assets overall, about 5,500 vans on the road. What's that? They're operated by about 170 managers, 70 driver trainers. So it's a reasonably substantive fleet. This is own account. The transport managers are all internal transport managers. So it's a corporate structure, and my role is to make sure that team and that infrastructure that I just described remains compliant from a legal perspective, and from a corporate perspective, make sure that we remain at the forefront of legislative change and influence that change where we can.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, James. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule, as well as the attendees. You've obviously got a very, very busy schedule and lots of vehicles to ensure safe and compliant. So thank you very much for popping by. Not last, but by no means least, over to Mr. Mike Vickers, who helps me host the Fleet Geeks podcast. Mike, over to you.
Thanks very much, Pete, and welcome everybody. And fantastic to see. It's got 35 now. Keep watching that count. I can't keep my eyes off it. So. Mike Vickers. I've been in the industry since 1900 and frozen to death. I left school at the ripe old age of 15 and became an apprentice fitter, HGV and PSV fitter. And I sort of, like most people in our industry, and I'm sure this will resonate with the people on the call, but you kind of transport is finds you. You don't find it, and so does transport management. So I sort of ventured into transport management. By starting off doing somebody a favour for a couple of weeks, but ended up as a couple of years and so on and so forth. So as a transport manager and latterly a fleet manager, there's a subtle difference between the two of them. I finally found my true calling in life when I started training about 6 years ago. And I've been, up until very recently, I've been training all the future transport managers through the Transport Manager Certificate of Professional Competence, with Logistics UK, and I joined Pete and the team in January, at the back end of January, to carry forward that into the work that we're looking to do at Flagship. So that's me, Pete.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mike. And you've taken time out. You're actually in the middle of delivering a Transport Manager CPC training course at the moment, aren't you? I'll just give
the participants a view of this. Yeah, I've got a group of people upstairs we're on the day today we call Pig Day. So the delegates will learn today how long it is between you can transport a pig without giving them water. So we're on day number 6 of a 10-day course. So they're upstairs.
That's a great question then. So to the attendees, how long are you able to transport a pig for without giving it water? There's a good question. It's part of the Transport Manager CPC. Yeah. Let's have a bit of fun with that. Right. Okay. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. And again, thank you, attendees, taking a bit of time out. I know you're busy people. What I'm going to do initially is I'm going to launch a poll. I've got functionality of a poll. So you'll see a poll launch on your screen now around what is your current job role. We're interested to survey that and see. So attendees, you'll be able to see that poll. We've got a couple for you during this session as well. So let's kick it off then. Jill, you have to offer them water. Okay, brilliant. Let's see everything come in. Right. So what is a transport manager worth? Or what is a transport manager worth? Who would like to kick off with that for me? Jo looks like she's frozen. No, she's back with me. Jo, have you done a bit of research? Have you, going over to you first, have you done a bit of research around various salaries according to the transport manager role?
Sorry, I'm having real
Okay, I'm gonna let you get your connection sorted, Joe. How about over to you, James? I know that you employ a range of transport managers with a range of levels of experience. So it'd be interested to see how you value the transport manager role within a business, and certainly the experience that's been provided. James, sorry.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks, Pete. So I guess it's about viewing worth in a couple of ways. I dare say there's a high proportion of the participants in today's webinar who think about worth in terms of how much am I going to be paid, and even within that, then that's going to be broken down by probably two main categories. You've got your internal transport managers, and as you say, the salary range there is going to be vast, you know, depending on the size of your fleet, geographically where you are. And I have a hint that you asked that Joe may have some numbers for us on that. I'm not sure, but we can talk around that if not. But there's certainly a wide range in terms of an internal transport manager. And then on the other side of that, which is kind of closer to home to a lot of the stuff that I get involved with, sitting outside of remuneration, is the worth of a transport manager to the business. So from my perspective, what is a transport manager worth to us from a corporate perspective? And that's really significant. So not that I'm not thinking that the remuneration piece isn't important to touch on today. I think it's really important to recognize worth in a different way. What is the transport manager worth to the business itself? Obviously, their worth is significant. It's not just about operational skill and knowledge. Sorry, it's not about operational skill and expertise, but it's about knowledge as well, isn't it? A transport manager is charged effectively in terms of fulfilling their undertakings with ensuring business continuity. It's quite unique in some respects, is transport management, in terms of that value of the individual, because let's have a think. If a company breached some employment legislation, then they could go to a tribunal and they can go with some fines and a bit of bad press. Not that I'm demeaning any of that, but that's where it goes. And it's kind of the same with health and safety legislation. You're going to breach some health and safety legislation. There's potential for a prosecution by the legislator and by the regulators, and some bad press and all of those things, which are, you know, none of us want any of that. But other than in extreme situations with the health and safety legislation, neither of those kind of main legislative frameworks that govern our businesses have the same weight as the transport manager legislative piece, because if you breach that, then the traffic commissioners can stop your trucks immediately, take your trucks off the road, stop your trucks from operating. So I think from a business continuity perspective, transport managers have quite a unique worth and value in their business. So there's my starter for you. There's other things, but how's that for a starter? I think it's really unique is the transport manager role in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely, James. You're absolutely correct. And yeah, John, I've just seen his comment. It's up on my screen at the moment. We're all guilty of underplaying the value of a transport manager. It's very, very true. And I appreciate, James, you coming in with that, because worth, the whole purpose of this webinar was to explore the terminology of worth, because we're very quick to think about a salary or a payment amount. But until a transport manager really values their worth and their experience and their impact on a business, only then are they able to ensure that they make a thorough contribution and ensure that they're able to negotiate a remuneration package which suits that level of pay. I get particularly frustrated. I'm going to quickly dive in from an external transport management point of view, and I've seen one of the comments pop in there about we move away from the number of vehicles to a day rate and placing a value on the day rate and the experience. I think that's ultimately very, very important. And until people understand how to negotiate on value and be able to negotiate on worth and the impact that they can have on the business and all of the things, and educate people around, or educate business owners around the worth of the transport management role, only then will we be able to properly negotiate rates. Perfect. And John, absolutely right. We should stop dissuading people from joining the industry. This is all part of that. We're looking to really raise standards and increase promotion of our industry as well. Mike, I'm just going to come over to you now. Mike, tell me a bit more about your opinion of worth and a transport manager's worth. I know that you see a varying array of transport managers coming into the profession or getting the qualification, and sort of what roles that entails, and potentially why they're using that qualification when they come to train with you.
Yeah, it's a good point. And you know, I see a variety of different people coming into the role for a variety of different reasons. We've got the people that need to gain the qualification in order to be named as a transport manager on an operator's license. Maybe they're owner drivers or maybe you know, in small businesses. But we see a large number of people coming into transport manager who because it's the only, as James said, it's a unique position really, isn't it, transport manager? It's the qualification needed to practice as a transport manager is one of the only places the only occupations that I can think of where there's, you know, a legislative requirement for that competency to be tested. You know what, I can't, you know, without decrying the sort of value of you know, what undermining these good people, but it's like doctors. I always say to people, it's a license to practice, as a transport manager, and that's how but it is the only available qualification at the moment that gets us there. So I'm seeing a lot of people coming through for the very purposes of needing to be named on an operator's license, which is what the legislation writes us as. But I'm also seeing a lot of people who use it as a sort of career step and a way of moving into a higher role within the business. So those people, when they qualify, you know, you can't really put a price on that qualification. What will this get me? What will I be able to get with this qualification? And the answer to that isn't always as simple. So that's my starter for 10. I think you're absolutely right. You know, value. We've got to look at value as a bit more holistically rather than just a number on a sheet of paper.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mike. Joe, are you back online? Can I hear you?
I am, yeah.
Amazing. Good to have you back.
Thank you.
And you've
sorry,
had
it's
an opportunity.
literally really in and out. So
Okay,
if if you can't hear me,
that's fine. If this is the nature of Zoom, if we lose you, then we lose you, and I'll just pick up. It's not my first rodeo, you know, so it'll be fine, right? Joe, how about
I could come back with so much, but I'm not going to.
Brilliant. Joe, tell me a bit. I know I did ask you to do a little bit of research. Talk to me about how businesses on a grander scale, just look outside of transport a minute. What constitutes the value of worth of a remuneration package for somebody based on their qualifications and their experience and how that role's valued? And did you have a look at sort of the variation in different salaries that you've seen in the transport sector?
Yeah, hopefully you can still hear me.
Yeah, we're struggling there, Joe, to be fair.
I literally heard the importance of a transport manager. I mean, yeah, I did do some research and I was actually astounded. Yeah, okay, everyone keeps freezing. Really sorry.
No worries, Joe. I'm gonna crack back on. No worries at all. Thank you very much, Dave. And I'm waiting with bated breath, as I'm sure the attendees are, to hear exactly what you've got to say. So maybe you're able to drop that in the chat for us instead. That would be really, really useful because you do keep freezing. So apologies about that. Okay, so I know that there's going to be a range of salaries that we can discuss, and I'm sure Joe's going to drop those in the chat shortly. What I'm going to do, we've had the poll results come in. So in the audience, we've got 31 responses. 12 people are transport managers. We've got 5 that are training, 6 that are company directors, and then we've got 8 in the other box. So the large majority of you are existing transport managers, and some of you are looking to train. I'll be interested to hear in the chat box what sort of salary expectations you have when you finish training. I'm sure that's quite delicate for some people, but that's very interesting. I'm just going to release another poll for you, which is this one here, which is around what people in the audience think a salary is worth for a transport manager. So I've just put that in the chat there. People will have that come up on their screen for them to share. It'll be quite interesting to have that poll come through there. Obviously, worth is very much related to experience and the value that a transport manager can bring to an organisation. I'm just going to come back to you then, James, around what sort of people listening, say if they're dissatisfied with their salary currently and the position they're in, what do you think that people could look to do proactively to help generate a better income from being a transport manager, James? How can they help develop themselves?
Sure. Okay. So if we're talking about development rather than negotiating a better salary, which may not be my area of expertise, then I mean, so first of all, fundamentally, what you got to remember as a transport manager, and it was embedded in the statutory documentation from the traffic commissioners a couple of years ago, is that CPD is super important. It always has been, but as I say, the traffic commissioners kind of embedded that in their requirements a couple of years ago, such that a transport manager can't simply complete their training with Mike, and that's it, never do anything else in terms of their ongoing development. So there's now a requirement for transport managers to be doing things to improve their knowledge and maintain their knowledge. And so not only is the requirement to do that, but back to your question, that is absolutely an excellent way of improving your worth. The useful thing about transport managers is there's lots of kind of bolt-ons you can do, whether that be dangerous goods is a good example, developing your health and safety knowledge. We all know that there's a lot of strings to a transport manager's bow as well, having some decent knowledge of employment legislation and health and safety legislation, as well as transport manager undertakings. And I said maybe you want to do other things like dangerous goods safety advisor. So doing all of those things, learning some more of those things, gaining some qualifications in those areas is always good if you've got a certification on paper. I would say that then in terms of just doing stuff in terms of the day job, which will increase your knowledge and increase your worth, keeping up your knowledge of legislative change. So super important is that. And I notice actually that really does distinguish some transport managers out there. If you can be as strong as you want operationally, but you need to maintain your technical background as well, because if you're providing a service to an operator, then you'll come unstuck if you don't know what legislative changes are coming around the corner. That might be something really significant, like what have we got this year? So the Guide to Roadworthiness will be updated this year. We've just seen some changes, annual kind of small changes to the statutory documents from the traffic commissioners. There's things like clean air zones, and in London, we've got the direct vision standard last year. We've just seen PCN values change. We're going to see some more changes in that regard later in the year. We've just seen changes to the highway code. So keeping abreast of all that stuff is super important in not only maintaining, but increasing your value. And that, and then perhaps mechanisms for doing that, going and doing some regular training with people like Mike. And I mean, personally, I do drive a CPC every year. I don't drive a truck, but I do drive a CPC every year with our teams, because that's really good at keeping up your knowledge of what drivers are doing and what drivers are talking about. Reading the trade press is another good one. Again, really underrated, I find, by transport managers. But don't get your knowledge of the industry from Facebook, because there's more stuff out there that's more reliable. So I would say subscribing to some trade press, getting out to some conferences. There are always lots of good conferences across the year to go to, whether they be conferences from your trade organizations like RHA, CILT, Logistics UK, all do conferences throughout the year, which are good for transport managers. Then there's industry conferences like Go Along to Microlize conferences on every year, which is free. What else have we got? What's the big commercial motor show? Commercial vehicle show. There we go, the CV show. Always good to attend. Lots of chats and talks going on in there, in the corners, as well as meeting and greeting people around the industry. So I would say, to summarise that little session, Pete, in answer to your question, you can set yourself aside, set yourself above, improve yourself, the transport manager population, by really keeping on top of all of that technical stuff and that legislative change and local councils. What are they doing? What's affecting your transport operation as it hits the road every day? And what's going to affect it in 6 months' time? DVS is a great example. The amount of transport managers who didn't know that we got 2 years' notice of the direct vision standard coming in and a year's notice of the extended ultra low emission zone in London. And we had operators 1 and 2 months out suddenly realizing that they couldn't operate in our biggest city because they hadn't kept abreast of that stuff. So transport manager who knows that is going to increase their worth.
Yeah, I totally echo your points there, James. I think there's a whole wealth of industry specific opportunities to develop yourself out there. Certainly, before I move over to Mike and get some input from him, some of the things that I do. So I like to explore outside of just the transport sector as well. So we subscribe to the DVSA Moving On blog, the Traffic Commissioner announcements. So if you haven't subscribed to those, please do make sure you do those. The HSE is a really useful one as well, because you get emails straight into your inbox. They do newsletters, they do recent case studies, recent situations. I see that my internet's a little bit unstable, so hopefully you can hear me okay at the moment. Hopefully I've come back. So the HSE is really useful. The CIPD, from an HR point of view, you can understand things a lot better coming from the CIPD as well. There's some of the things we do. There's a lot of opportunity in commercial motor. I get a bit frustrated. Commercial motor is often largely adverts and you're paying to be advertised to, but there is probably about 2 pages of real great value, which is usually the synopsis from recent applications, decisions and public inquiries as well. Always worth having a look at those as well. Mike, over to you. What about yourself? How, if people are listening into this session and they want to develop their skills, where would you suggest they go looking?
Well, absolutely. And I think it's important that we develop ourselves as people, as managers, not just in the transport world. And James made some very, very good points there about keeping up to date with legislation, because you don't want to be the one that's caught out by legislation that you haven't seen coming. So a part of your role as a manager is to look at the future and look at what's going to happen, look where you could possibly be affected. Absolutely echo that 100%. But to do that, you've got to keep your sort of name in the frame, and you've got to keep pushing forward. So all the things that have been mentioned there in terms of join, obviously the most important network to join is our Fleet Geeks network, and come and join a growing sort of community of people. I must admit, Pete, I was new to Facebook. I've never used Facebook until you and I became sort of friends. And looking at Facebook, it's a strange one, isn't it? It's the people on the Facebook groups tend to be looking for that golden loophole, and always searching for that. What they're looking for is somebody to tell them, somebody to affirm to them that what they're doing is either right or wrong. And there's so many different opinions on that. And it's quite sad that we've come to, it's great that we've got these forums, but it's quite sad that we've come to this position where we're going to post something on social media because we believe we can get away with doing something in a certain way, but which is I think is rather sad. So I think social media has its role, but let's hope that we can get these communities going that will enhance and be able to develop people in slightly different ways to that. Sort of somewhere in between a sort of official training sort of session and learning on the job. Learning on the job. Somebody mentioned there that it's not a 9 to 5. Sorry, I didn't see that because it's gone up out the way now, so I can't see. So somebody mentioned, apologies, but somebody mentioned it's not a 9 to 5 job, is it? No, it is not a 9 to 5 job that we do. So we can't say that we're worth X number of pounds per hour, because how many hours do we work as transport managers? I remember starting at a company once as a transport manager, old well-established family business, and I said, what time do we start? What time do we finish? And the old director said, well, when the first truck goes out, and you finish when the last truck comes in, and that was, okay, I get it. And that's how we're going to work. So yeah, I think, come back to the original point there, yeah, develop as a person. James made a cracking point about managers attending driver CPCs. I had a really, really good session on, so first time I've done a driver CPC for a little while. I had a really, really good session on Saturday with a great bunch of people. And one of the things that they kind of came out of that feedback I got was, do managers come on this course? Because if they don't, they should. And they're absolutely right, aren't they? When was the last time a transport manager sat in on a transport manager course? Because you'll learn not just the stuff you need to learn, but you'll learn about your guys and girls that are working for you. And it's a really, really good place to get in touch with those people and find out what the real issues are beyond what we'd normally expect. So for me, yes, that's a great point. Do as much as you can to develop yourself as a person, as a manager, and the rest will follow, I believe.
Hi, it's Pete from Flagship Partners. We're really proud to sponsor the Fleet Geeks podcast. Flagship Partners offer a range of consultancy and training services to ensure that our customers remain compliant and have the best possible knowledge to be able to fulfill their work. If you're interested in support with any of our safety, HR or compliance services, or you want to train to be a transport manager or need driver CPC training, give us a call today. Absolutely brilliant, Mike. Thank you very, very much. And I echo what both of you have said. I think there's two areas for us to look at as transport managers, and I think it's actually summed up in the title. So you've got the transport, which is the legislative elements, the law, the different developments that are happening and staying ahead of that. And then you've got the manager side of it, which is the people side of your role, being a good leader, being a good manager, developing those communication skills and all of the things that come there. Absolutely. So one of the things that the Fleet Geeks community, and I noticed our tech support have just put the link in the group. If you're not part of the Fleet Geek community on Facebook, please do join it and get involved. We do agree that Facebook isn't always the best place to find a solution. We often say just reach out to one of us direct. That's no problem at all. But what is good is it is useful to see some of the challenges other people are facing. In fact, I'll let you into a little secret. I find most of my podcast content from there. I think the idea for this webinar came from the Facebook groups because people are talking about how much do ETMs charge, how much should transport managers get paid, because I then get to understand what people are looking for, what they're interested in, and what excites them. So it's a great opportunity for you to see where people are developing. And often I learn things just by looking on Facebook as well. Okay, so one of the things I did want to mention as well, whilst we're talking about development opportunities, one of the things that Fleet Geeks is going to do, which I believe is very revolutionary in the sector, is we're looking to put together cohorts of 8 to 10 transport managers from different sectors and have some time together each month, a couple of hours each month, and we're going to do what's called a mastermind. So we're going to share challenges, share people challenges, share legislative challenges, and share best practice as part of that mastermind process. So I don't think that it's been done before, and I see it as a really, really good opportunity for people to get involved. So if you're interested, please do drop me or drop Mike a line. I'm certainly going to get James involved at some point as well to come and guest speak, and at these events I'll get guest speakers. I'll get, you'll have heard people on the Half Dozen Things podcast that I've had come and join me who are very, very experienced and have a wealth of knowledge, and we're going to look to introduce these masterminds, which I think is going to be a really, really great way of sharing best practice and learning from other industries. Because whilst I say that it's great for us to learn more from our industry, I get a lot of value from listening to things like the High Performance podcast, where you listen to sports people or successful business people around the successes they've had and what they've implemented, and then look at that, being able to introduce that into the role that we have as well. Interestingly, the salary expectations, I've just shared the poll. So those of you who were looking to join us as part of finding out what you should be paid, hopefully that's quite representative of what people's expectations are. If you can see the results of the poll there, we've asked 30 transport managers who have joined this call here from a range of roles, and there's sort of one in 6, so a sixth of the transport managers think somewhere up to 35,000, nearly just over 40% 36 to the 45 mark, and then just over 40% are looking at 46,000 or above. So that's quite a broad range of salary levels, depending on experience, depending on knowledge. And obviously, I think what that demonstrates is the more you professionally develop yourself, if you're in that lower range, for example, of 25 to 35,000 pounds potentially, which I would say is probably a starting point, and you want to get up and over that 46,000 pound benchmark, that is absolutely a great opportunity for you to do that via professional development, by sharing experiences and by sharing your understanding as well. So I hope that's been very, very useful. So I've just got tech support sent me a message on the fly. Yeah, very good. Yeah, please do that. That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much. One of the things that I would just like to share with people as a poll first, whilst that's being set up, is interestingly in the comments, we were told that transport managers should have HGV driving experience. I'm very interested to hear the thoughts of people as to whether they think that that is true from the audience. I think it's quite a complex question. And do the best drivers make the best transport managers? I don't know. Let's put it over to the panel and see what you guys think. In the meantime, whilst we're just having that poll raised and people are filling that out for us, do you have any other input, Mike or James? Joe, are you back on the call? Are you able to put any input in? Are you here?
So far, I'm here, and it's not cut out for about the last 5 minutes. So, yeah, I mean, just my input. Obviously, I haven't heard all of what everyone's been saying, but just regards to a bit of research that I've been doing. Now, average salaries are looking at between 37 and 43 is kind of an average. Although I was quite alarmed, I did see one at 71,000 in Bedfordshire. So I don't know how big their fleet is or what's going on there, but you know, that seems quite a lot of money for the role. But yeah, I just think, you know, with regards to a transport manager, I think it's important to, you know, realise that they don't just deal with the transport and the compliance. You know, they wear a number of different hats throughout the day. You know, from 1 minute they could be dealing with the maintenance of vehicles that need doing. Are there any inspections? To someone in their team coming to them with a wage query. They've got budgets that they might have to keep up to date with. Recruitment, how much of a say do they have in that? And on top of all that, they've got to motivate and encourage their team as well. So I don't think a transport manager is literally just about the vehicles and the planning of the routes. If they've got a team behind them, a good manager is never just about themselves, in my opinion. It's about the team. So it's down to them to encourage and motivate them. And there's also, you know, is there any succession planning? Who's going to take over? Is there someone that's making noises that they want to leave? Who are you going to get to put in that place? You know, look for your rising stars. Who is looking? Who do you think is going to be staying? How well do you look after them? You know, the training, how much training do you offer? Yeah, I think there's just so much more in the background that a transport manager actually does. And I think it's just, and obviously, as we're all very aware of late, it's important to recognise people as individuals. And so when you're thinking about the learning side of things, you know, some people are going to pick it up quicker. Some people are going to pick things up in different ways. So, you know, if you have a transport manager that's leaving, you know, chances are the transport manager that you've got coming in as a replacement isn't going to be the same. But I think one of the most important things, I think, is to look after your team with everything else that you've got going on, because I'm sure, you know, their heads bounce around like pinballs most of the day. But the more you look after your people, the more they stay with you, and ultimately that gets your recruitment costs down.
Can I come in there? Joe's made
Thank you very much, Joe.
If I can just drop in there, Pete. Joe's made a fantastic point there about succession planning. I get an awful lot of delegates on transport manager courses, and I say to them, why are you here? Why are you on this course? And they say, well, you know, I was happily doing XYZ job. And 2 months ago, the transport manager who's been here for 15 years, 50 years, whatever it might be, has said, suddenly turned around and said, I'm retiring. How old's that transport manager? Well, I don't know, they're in the mid-60s. Well, that's not a clue that we might be looking to, that transport manager might not be going on forever, Transport managers do have to have a life outside of transport, and it might give you the clue that you might need at some point to replace that transport manager. So now that person who's now training, we don't necessarily know they needed to be in that, or they wanted to be in that position, but they've just been told, you've got to go on a transport manager course because we need you. But that for a business could have been a huge upheaval. We've had a transport manager doing it a certain way for a certain amount of time, and now we're going to bring somebody else in and do it slightly differently. So the message there to operators is that succession plan is so important. That so that I think that was a cracking point about succession planning, Joe. I think that's very relevant.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mike. And thank you very much, Joe, as well, because I think one of the things I'm in the middle of delivering a mental health in the workplace course at the moment, totally non-transport related. I am at a large family haulier delivering it, but I've got teams from the warehouse and all different parts of the business. And one of the things we're talking about at the moment is around not only just well-being, but also the cost of people leaving a business and then re-recruiting and the impact that has negatively on a business. So retaining people is always the best policy, particularly if they're good at what they do. Okay, so I've shared the poll. Hopefully you all saw the results. Very interesting around whether a transport manager needs to have been a driver previously. I would say it's almost 50-50, slightly more on the yes fence. Quite a few people were on the no fence and several were unsure. I see some comments coming in around that, a bit of rhetoric around it helps with understanding. Absolutely. Empathy is a very important thing for a transport manager, and having empathy with drivers. And I think one of the things that I wanted to comment back when this was originally being advertised as a webinar was actually what the people want to be understood. Drivers want to be understood. What they think is that a transport manager needs to have been a driver to fully understand, but actually it's a key role is having empathy with your people and being able to understand what they do. You could have been a passenger in that vehicle and not necessarily driven it if you get to see the challenges they face on a daily basis. So I'm just putting that out there as well. We've got a poll out at the moment around if you're interested in that mastermind. In the meantime, I'm just going to hang on a minute. There's no questions in the Q&A. Has anyone got any questions before I start to wrap this up and let my good panelists, amazing people, get back to their day job of making sure that people are safe and well looked after in their roles? So has anyone got any Q&A in the meantime? Please do drop those questions in. Otherwise, I'm going to start to wrap the session up. We've had a few interesting polls, just to recap. It's quite clear there's a salary range in the role, as we spoke about. If you want to increase your worth and increase your salary, we need to look at your development, and you need to develop yourself both from a transport knowledge and legislative point of view and what's coming up, but also from a managerial point of view too. They're sort of the key learnings. Do you need to have been a driver first? Potentially not, depending on what side of the fence you sit. And I don't think we're ever going to answer that question.
On that point, Pete, can I just come in there? Looking at, I agree. I know we had this discussion the other day, and we talked about inclusivity. And one of the things that hit me, looking at the groups that I get through Transport Manager, 4% of HGV drivers in this country are female. So we've just excluded almost half the population. If we're saying that a transport manager has to have that experience of being a HGV driver, the chances are that they won't come from the female half of the population, because there's only 4% of females. The HGV drivers, only 4% are females. So I think we're not very, by saying that a transport manager must have been a HGV driver, you're kind of closing the door on some very, very good and talented people, coming through the ranks that don't fit that stereotypical bill, So that's my point on that. Although they're very valid points, and as you say, it's empathy is the most important thing rather than that experience.
You're absolutely right, Mike. Sorry, James.
No, I was going to add. It's for me. It's another skill isn't it, on your CV? There's nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with having that driver background as a transport manager. And to be honest, there's a really good balance in the chat about the pros and cons. I've just been reading those, some really good points being made. And so if you've come from a driving background to be a transport manager, what a great skill to have. You immediately have that understanding, whether that be from, from basic maintenance to what it's actually like on the road. I think that's a really vital skill. But there are lots of other skills as well, coming through to the industry with other skills, whether they be administrative skills, leadership skills, or other knowledge bits, that they can be just as valuable. So I think it's about recognizing, and it probably goes back to what I said earlier on about increasing your worth. Try and be honest with yourself about where you're strong and where you're not so strong. If you've come from a driving background, then knowing that driver on the road, knowing what the challenges are, is going to be really strong. But you might not be strong on other topics such as, I don't know, budgeting or keeping up with legislative change or leadership. I think going back, tying that in with what we said earlier on about increasing your worth, really honestly evaluate where you're not strong enough and go and do that. If you've come from a non-transport background and you've done transport for a couple of years, you might find that maintenance is your weak area. So you need to go into that's where you need to expand your knowledge in order to develop more. So I think in my view on the bit about coming from having a driving background, I think it's just another skill, albeit a very good one. It's just another skill on your CV. And it's more important to recognize where your strengths and weaknesses are and go after the ones where you're not so strong. If you feel like knowing what the day-to-day challenges of a driver is a gap in your knowledge, go and get in the truck, go and do it, go and speak to some drivers, be a bit humble and get on the road for a couple of weeks and fill that gap,
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant, James. I totally agree with your feedback there. Yeah, fantastic. Right, I'm conscious of the Q&A is topping up with questions here, so I'm just going to start to answer some of those. So the first one I've accidentally marked it as answered was from Graham about what the lead-in time for registering a 3.5 ton van to deliver into the EU is. I'll be honest, I don't know the answer for that, Graham, but I'm more than happy to take it away and email it to you. I've not been involved in any of these operators. Do you know, Mike?
I believe it's May this year, May 2022.
May 22. I believe there is a grace period. What was the question? The question was how long to register a 3.5 ton van to deliver into the EU with the change of legislation for vans into the EU.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I was going to say it's a bit. I'm a bit uncertain of that. I'm sure James is quite happy to have a look at that by the looks of it. I think he looks like
it's fine. I nearly answered, but I always have a reservation in answering off the top of my head because I get it wrong. The challenge I think we've got is that the change takes effect in May, and if I remember rightly, and I will go away and clarify for you, you may not be able to register until the change takes place. So you've got to be ready, and then when the change takes place, you can get your operator license organised. But yeah, I'm happy to just clarify.
Perfect. James, you've been asked again what the names of the organisations are that were mentioned by James for development. I think I heard you mention the RHA, the Road Haulage Association.
So I did. I said for if you want to be being a member of one of the trade organisations is a really good way of getting updates into your life, into your inbox, into your in-feed, however you take it, and they would be Logistics UK. I would say first. Although I'll try and remain objective and say on 3, but I would say that Logistics UK are particularly good. Road Haulage Association, so the RHA, and the CILT would be 3 that I can think of.
Perfect. Thank you very much, James. So I'm just conscious of time because we do need to get people away now. I think there's probably room for a webinar here on the 3.5 ton van situation for EU guys. John Henderson's just put in a question on clarifying the exact circumstances. So what say you to us doing a webinar in the next couple of weeks on on the 3.5 ton van, or maybe we'll do a podcast for it and release that. I think the other question was around many drivers. So Audrey has asked, many drivers have received salary increases and retention bonuses due to shortage in the industry. Should the same increases have been applied to transport managers? Well, that's again, it's a debate.
Interesting point, huh?
Essentially,
yeah,
pay is related to value, is what we've been discussing. The whole purpose of this session is pay is related to value, and value is is created by demand as well.
Yeah, the difficult. I think it's a really awesome question. I think where we have to, whilst it's been really interesting for us all to see those salary increases with drivers, I think you've got to try and take a step back a bit and say that's the market doing its work. That was nothing to do with us. And arguably, therefore, it doesn't affect salaries of the people around it. The market did that to us by saying that, you know, that particular skill was in high demand, so the value of that went up. It's I'm not saying that transport managers shouldn't be worth more, but I would take care in using the comparison with a market-driven change like that one.
I think that's a very measured response, James. It was very much so. The value is driven by worth, but it's also driven by supply and demand. And whenever there's a shortage of supply, therefore demand increases. And therefore that can increase challenges. I've got another one here from Edward, who's asked that for an operator license to start your own business, do I need to pass a transport manager course? Edward, I say it would be very useful for you to have a good O license awareness. So an OLAC course would be sufficient, but you can employ an external transport manager to help support that application. That's sort of as far as depth I'll go into with that. But essentially, no, you don't need to. But I would suggest, when you're a new operator as a director and not a transport manager, the DVSA invite you onto a new operator seminar. They are also very good. If anyone listening has ever been invited to one, I always recommend that you attend the new operator seminars as well. But an OLAC course is always very useful for directors who are non-transport managers. Joanne has asked about the reversing element for the HGV test is a good idea. And Hope, can we form a group where we meet physical to a particular place for more education? Hope, I'm more than happy to consider that. We're based in Peterborough here, which is fairly central. And if there's demand from people to meet locally, we can do. We have a training facility to be able to do that. So just lastly, because I am conscious of time and we're going to tie it up, Joanne has asked about the HGV reversing element. Was it a good idea? Yes or no? What are our thoughts on that, panelists?
I think that's definitely a good idea for a podcast. That one is, Pete. Yeah.
The reversing element, I must say, I think in the interest of time, that's probably another whole load of content, isn't it?
Great point, great discussion. And also you could include in that the one of my things, and I'm sure James will agree with me on this, is the removal of the necessity to take a trailer test for a B licence holder. Does that mean to say we're going to have a lot of people with vans towing trailers with people who haven't had any training, and that worries me. So I think that's a really good point, and thank you for it. And I'm sure we can get a webinar, a podcast out of that one, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, I'm going to tie up the webinar at this point. James, thank you so much for joining us and for your measured, valued input as always. I always enjoy seeing your comments in the Facebook group, and I always enjoy having you come on both the podcast and here. So thank you very much. And I hope that you'll be happy as we do more webinars to come and join us again and share your wisdom as well. Mike, pleasure to have you on. Go and train some more transport managers up to be fantastic, mate. Thank you very much.
So we've got a couple of answers. Water, yes, they do have to be on. So you can transport a pig for up to 24 hours, but they must be offered water at appropriate intervals. So discussion, please, for the next one. What is appropriate water for a pig? There we go.
Perfect, brilliant. Well done, mate. I'd nearly forgotten about that, so well done for you. Joe, thank you for joining us. It's much appreciated. You take care now, and we'll speak to you again soon. And just finally, I've had the poll results come back in. We've got a lot of people interested in that mastermind, and many who want some more information too. So we will be in touch in due course. Thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you very much for joining, and we do really appreciate it. Over and out. Please do keep an eye out for future webinars coming.
Thank you very much, everybody. See you all soon.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please share with your friends and colleagues too. Join us for free on Facebook with the Fleet Geeks community for transport and fleet managers. Fleet Geeks offers ongoing professional development, networking and mentoring too. So get in touch with me, Pete Rushmer, on any social media platform to find out more.